In my video covering the book of Genesis, probably the most frequent recurring question I received was from people asking why I didn't mention Lilith, Adam's first wife. And well, the reason I made such a bold and subversive omission was because the book of Genesis does not mention Lilith. In fact, she's arguably not a character in the Bible at all. Her name only appears once in chapter 34 of the book of Isaiah. This section of the book prophesies the destruction of Edom, how the mountains will flow with blood, the streams will turn to pitch, yada yada, typical biblical doomsday stuff. Verse 14 says, quote, "Wild cats shall meet with hyenas, goat demons shall call to each other, there too Lilith shall repose and find a place to rest." The identity of this Lilith here is unclear. This is one of the challenges with the Hebrew Bible. If you're reading an ancient Greek text and there's a word you don't know, well, you've got a massive library of other Greek literature to reference. If there's a Hebrew word you don't know that only appears once in the Bible, you might be out of luck. There won't be much, if any, other Hebrew literature from the same period. That being said, in this case, we do actually get a couple tiny hints from the good old Dead Sea Scrolls. Among them is the earliest Isaiah manuscript, which uses the word Lilith in plural form, suggesting it wasn't meant as a proper noun. Lilith also appears on a list of demons in the fragmentary 4Q510 manuscript. So, in the context of Isaiah 34, it seems that Liliths are a type of demon or an unclean animal, possibly the owl mentioned in the next verse. And that's where you get a lot of Bibles translating Lilith to night bird, night creatures, or something in that vein. Some scholars have argued that this classification of beings can be traced back to pre-Jewish tradition. Hebrew Lilith is etymologically connected to Akkadian Lilitu, which referred to female demonic spirits. Through this linguistic connection, 20th century Assyriologist Samuel Noah Kramer identified an apparent early version of Lilith in an Akkadian prologue to the Epic of Gilgamesh written around 600 BCE. In this supplementary text to the epic, the goddess Inanna plants a tree in her garden. She tends to the tree, planning to craft its wood into a throne and bed for herself once it's matured. But after 10 years, she finds it inhabited by 3 monsters. A serpent coiled around the base, a giant bird called Anzu nested in the upper branches, and having made a home in the trunk was something called Kisakil-Liliki, which in Kramer's 1938 translation he calls Lilith. He probably made this connection based on its Akkadian name, and that, like the Isaian Lilith, Kisakil-Liliki could be some kind of owl creature as she lives inside a tree trunk. If this sounds like a bit of a stretch to you, yeah. Anyway, the hero Gilgamesh comes, kills the serpent, and scares away the other 2 monsters, and that's the end of the only narrative which might include a proto-Lilith figure. Other potential evidence for a pre-Jewish Lilith is sparse. Some of Kramer's contemporaries believed her to be on the Burney relief, a Mesopotamian artifact depicting a bird-footed deity surrounded by lions and owls. But modern scholars doubt this and consider the figure to more likely be the goddess Ishtar or Ereshkigal. There's also the Arslan Tash amulet, AT1, on which are written some incantations against evil spirits. One of those spirits might be some version of Lilith, but the name is difficult to read and has been reconstructed differently by various scholars. In fact, it might not be a name at all, but simply be the word for night and day. And that's about it. Ultimately, we can't say for certain who or what the biblical Lilith is, or from what earlier tradition she might have originated. The Lilith that we're all familiar with doesn't show up till well into the 1st millennium CE. She's mentioned a handful of times in the Babylonian Talmud circa 500. In a section concerning laws relating to childbirth, it poses a scenario in which a fetus is born with wings, apparently resembling a Lilith in this aspect. I certainly hope that's not a thing that happened a lot. Another section claims that one of womankind's punishments for the sin of Eve was that they must grow long hair like Lilith. And there's a warning that no one should sleep in a house alone lest they be vulnerable to an attack from Lilith. In accordance with this idea of her invading people's homes, she also shows up on a whole bunch of incantation bowls from that era. Incantation bowls are handy little tools for catching demons. If you're being harassed by a malevolent specter, all you gotta do is take a clay bowl, draw the demon in the center tied up, and write a warding spell around it. Or if you're selling the bowl to an illiterate person, you can just draw shapes that look like words, which is something people actually did, and I find that hilarious. Then you just trap the demon underneath like a cockroach and bury it under your house. Thanks, Incantation Bowl. Please refer to the included instructions before using Incantation Bowl. Incantation Bowl Incorporated is not liable for any injuries, illnesses, deaths, or demonic possessions that occur through misuse of the product. If you are still experiencing hostile supernatural phenomena after using Incantation Bowl, please contact a licensed shaman or exorcist. From the inscriptions on bowls souls targeting Lilith, we can glean that she was believed to cause the deaths of children, and also to be a succubus who'd seduce people in their sleep. The satirical alphabet of Ben Sirah, written somewhere between 700 and 1000 CE, provides our first origin story of Lilith. According to this narrative, when God formed Adam out of the earth, he also created his wife, Lilith. This is probably a tradition that developed in order to reconcile the apparent contradiction between Genesis 1, where man and woman were created simultaneously, and Genesis 2, where Eve is created sometime after Adam. Regardless, because Lilith was made out of the same material as Adam, she attempted to assert her equality while the two of them were, making a sandwich. Lilith insisted that her condiments should go on top, but Adam disagreed and claimed superiority over her. Then, in defiance, Lilith spoke the sacred name of God and disappeared. Adam cried out to God to bring his wife back, and so he sent out the angels Sinoi, Sanzanoi, and Samangaloth to go find her. The three of them confronted Lilith at the Reed Sea and demanded she return to her husband, or else 100 of her children would die every day, to which she replied, "Oh yeah? Well, if you're gonna kill my babies, I'll kill all the babies, every single one. Except for the ones that have your names written on protective amulets. I'll leave them alone." Wow, you drive a hard bargain, ma'am. You've got yourself a deal. Meanwhile, God took Adam's rib and made him a new companion, who, having been made from a lesser piece of man, would be subservient to him. Or at least that's this medieval author's interpretation of the biblical text. There are many other interpretations regarding where exactly Eve came from and her purpose in relation to Adam, some of which I intend to cover in a future video. I just figured Lilith deserved her own video first. Anyway, this version of Lilith from first millennium Judaism as the demoness wife of Adam is what most people today have heard of. However, if we look into later Kabbalistic tradition, things get weirder. Kabbalah is a branch of Jewish mysticism which emerged in the early 2nd millennium and seeks to explain the nature of God, the purpose of humanity, the origins of the universe and evil, simple concepts like that. Kabbalistic texts provide their own versions of Lilith's origins. Some, again, have her created as the original companion of Adam turned vengeful demoness. However, others give her a much more significant role as a full-on divinity and primordial source of evil. For instance, Rabbi Isaac Ha-Cohen's treatise on the left emanation has Lilith as the consort of Samael, king of the demons, the two of them having been born as one body and later separated. Now, when I started writing this video, I didn't intend for it to end with a cheap tease for a part 2 sometime in the indeterminate future, but Kabbalistic mythology honestly deserves its own entire video. If I were just to cover the narratives relevant to Lilith, none of it would make sense out of context. So, if you're curious in the meantime, you can check out Dr. Justin Sledge's video on Lilith and the Kabbalah on the Esoterica YouTube channel. He also has an entire 14-hour Intro to Kabbalah series for the truly intrepid among you. The whole channel is a fantastic resource for all things mystical and esoteric, and it was a huge help for making this video. I continue to be grateful to all the hard-working scholars out there sharing their expertise, providing me with material to make silly drawings.